Dan John will be presenting strength training for the elite athlete at this year's Health and Strength Conference in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Dan, in your experience, what is the biggest misconception trainers have about training elite athletes?
Oh, yeah. Well, misconception number one is that you think that they are something unhuman, something out of this world, something alien and foreign, that you have to constantly invent new things. You have to, cinnamon's not good enough. You make everything too fancy. And the truth is, it's quite simple. And then the second misconception is the idea that more. More flexibility, more strength, more endurance, more work capacity, more. And the truth is, enough is enough. So, what most people do when they train the elite athlete is they get them ready for one day.
Huh.
And yet, like in baseball, it's 180 days with 162 games sprinkled in there.
Wow.
Football has a very long season. I've had track seasons with 26 track meets. One year I had 20 Highland games. You can't show up with six pack abs shredded and last 180 games like that. And there's nothing wrong with having six pack abs and being shredded, but you're not going to survive. You're going to throw away all those millions of dollars
Right.
just to look pretty on day one. So those are the big ones.
You've had a lot of experience training elite athletes. Can you elaborate on who they've been and what you see as some of their common denominators?
Well, generally don't name names. You don't name the team names, and you shouldn't. I don't think you should because if you have someone who's superstar, it might have been their kindergarten teacher that really was the person who shaped their life. So I don't want to be that guy who puts up the sign, train 400 Olympians, because we all know that's a bunch of junk. Uh, I've trained guys with Super Bowl rings and all-star baseball players, several professional teams, the most elite fighting forces in the United States, rugby programs from all over the world. I've assisted and talked to many college teams, you know, um, and of course, there's track and field and Highland games and all that. Uh, the most common thing is that when you look at their roots, where they came from, it's not what a typical parent thinks happened. Like the one guy, well, we can throw his name out because he's retired now, John Buck. He told me one time we are training, he goes, "Nah, the key for me is that his babysitter was a very famous gymnast who taught him and his friends gymnastics while babysitting. And
Wow.
later he got into BMX racing. But he always felt that the lessons he learned in gymnastics and BMX racing were far more important than just standing behind the plate and taking swings with his bat. And when you talk to elite athletes, most of the time they've played multiple sports. It's an insight I got both from world record holder John Powell in the discus and the great Olympic lifter Tommy Kono. And it's a tough thing to hear for most people. Once you specialize, if you are not world class in 3 years, you're not good enough. That's a heartbreaker for a lot of people. They'll say, "Well, little Wendy's playing year-round, soccer or volleyball, or whatever." And what you hear from every elite athlete, every good coach is the moment you specialize, that clock, and it's an atomic, it's a James Bond, it's a Star Trek clock, the kind that always goes down 3, 2, 1, and then Sherlock Holmes flips the switch or something like that, or Captain Kirk. The moment you start specializing, your clock starts counting down, and you don't have a ton of time to be world class or the top of your game. So, when you take a little boy who's in seventh or eighth grade and you say, "Oh, we don't want little Billy to play any other sports except baseball or basketball," if he isn't, nationally recognized in 3 years, it ain't going to happen. Now they might be able to play, junior college basketball or NAIA or Division III. There's nothing wrong with that, or even Division I, but they're not going to be on the top of the game. There are exceptions to that because there's always exceptions, but almost universally, once you specialize as an elite, the clock's ticking. And now it's very important you listen to that because 3 years after, you should have the body and the performances that would be recognized by the rest of us as superior.
Wow.
Yeah, that's stunning, I think.
Yeah, that is.
In high school, I did football, wrestling, and I did the hurdles and discus. I played Catholic Youth League basketball, and I played soccer. I was a goalkeeper, or keeper, I guess is what they call them now. And when I finally decided to focus on, I don't know if I ever actually decided, but then after that, I Olympic lifted half the year and discus through the discus. Once I kind of specialized, that's when the real leap in my career happened. But here's the interesting thing: even though I was a good national level thrower, using Tommy Kono and John Powell's numbers, they're right. I was not going to be an Olympic champion. By the way, and this is elite athletics. If you need a hug, go try something else.
Awesome. What are the 3 most important qualities an athlete should look for in their trainer?
In their coach or trainer, not stupid's one. Uh, Not an idiot. First it'd be the classic: someone who'll do no harm. That goes all the way back to Hippocrates. I mean, someone who's not going to hurt you. Number 2, I'd say, and this doesn't fit my normal formula, but someone who's not trying to make a name for themselves, and that's a tough one. Everyone's always trying to get a piece of elite athletes, Navy SEALs, and all the rest. You want somebody who's grown up past that. You know, the third thing is you got to look in their toolbox. You've got to look in their quiver. If they only have one tool, even if it's a good tool, it's not going to be good for you. Okay, if you go to an Olympic lifting coach, that's fine. They can teach you a lot of things. But a baseball player who's 27 years old, doesn't need Olympic lifting. But the lessons you learn from Olympic lifting would carry over well into coaching a baseball player. So, and that's, a lot of people who never did anything except for kettlebells, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if your only answer is just these 6 movements, you're not going to help an elite athlete, because you have to have more tools. And by the way, it could be more, it could be also maybe kettlebell swings aren't the answer for you, but it could be something else in the hinge family, if you follow my point. Many elite athletes can't take any more ballistics to certain parts of their body. The lower back, the knees, the shoulders, they're hanging on, I hate to say by threads, but threads is a pretty good way to think of it.
What kind of exercises, modalities, or equipment have you found that give the highest yield in improving your athlete's performance?
Every single one. The tool is secondary. Now, having said that, I'm a huge fan of kettlebells, TRX, and barbells, but I also have Brett Contreras' hip thrust machine. We also have a Concept 2 rower and an Aerodyne. We have rings, we have parallettes. Oh my gosh, we have ropes. You name it, we have it. Because sometimes, and then I've been in situations where all I had was an ammo box. So, the tool is secondary. The focus on the movement is primary. And of course, I always tell people the third most important thing is load. A lot of us, especially when you're first coming up as an athlete, you're always looking at, first you want to bench 100 pounds, then 200 pounds, then 300 pounds, and then 400 pounds. Well, when you've been around a while, you don't worry so much about that number. You're more worried about the balance of things and the quality of movement. So when you come to tools, and I'll tell you the other one that I think is overrated too. This isn't popular here, but I would put tools and then programs. We're doing a program. Well, when you're working with a Major League Baseball player, you don't have a program. If a guy comes in and takes his knees out last night, you're not squatting today. If the guy has to shoot up just to walk, you're not doing that fancy little program you designed. So when I work with certain teams, they've come up with some really good ideas. Like they do the standard A B system. Where you same but different. You follow, right? The basic.
Right.
If you row one day, you pull up 2 days later. Well, they find that A B A B A B, so that what we consider a 2-week rotation might take 5 weeks or 4 weeks or 3 weeks. And that's one of the signs that you got a good coach, is that they understand that recovery is the biggest issue these poor guys and gals have. Not not doing more. It's hard to put your uniform on that many days in a row. I mean, think about the NFL now. You know, these guys are probably showing up in mini camps now in the next months, and they'll put their uniforms on in July, and some of them will play all the way through February. And then think about and just look at hockey, what hockey they do every night, back to back to back to back. The NBA, you know, those road trips they're on. And then you have some psycho coach who says, today's a 5 sets of 5 day, because see, I have it written on a little piece of paper. That's the key, I think, to that's the answer, is you got to be reasonable with elite athletes. They want more until they realize that they need less. And it's an odd little transition to watch. It's as fascinating as anything you'll ever do in your life. More, 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 more. I need less, don't I? Yes, you do. Most guys don't. Most collision sport athletes, so I can use the word guy there, don't survive long enough to understand that less is more.
Wow. All right, well, last question. You're a world-renowned coach, but you appear to be very open to improving your skills by listening to others. Who do you turn to refine your own game?
Well, let's see. I like to work with those other 7 billion people on the planet Earth. I call each and every one of them every single day to ask. Uh, Truth is, I'll give you some names in just a moment, but one of the things that we look for with the guys, if you're one of my mentees or one of my interns or assistants, I ask you to adopt an underserved community. Taylor Lewis, for example, works with people who have cystic fibrosis. I work with a couple of people who have MS. I ask you to look, breast cancer is an underserved group of people in fitness. You know, so what we try to do is teach this. So listen. So this is I'm answering your question, but a slightly different way. If it works for people who have cystic fibrosis, or the other day I met this wonderful young lady who she's deaf, she can't hear, and we had a wonderful talk about an underserved community, the deaf, and probably the blind too.
Mm-hmm.
But if something you do works with cystic fibrosis or MS or the deaf, and it works with an elite athlete, here's the nice thing. You're pretty sure it's going to work with everybody else too. So one of the first things I do, and this sounds so opposite of what you wanted me to say, but I like to listen to people who it's a struggle to get into the gym. It's a struggle for them to want to be in touch in a positive way with their body. Once you deal with that, then I look for people who they're on a different tack, TACK, than I am. Somebody who's looking at things a little different. It's funny, if you read Max Shank's book, Ultimate Athleticism, he includes a couple of exercises that I never would have considered. Well, so what did I do? I bought some equipment, tried them out, and learned that there was a huge gap in my training and coaching. So you follow where this is going to head. I like talking to a guy in California named Barry Ross, who only works with sprinters, and if it doesn't make them faster, he throws it out. In our community, there's a lot of people in our community I like to talk to. One person who you might not remember is Jim Hooper. He's out there. He's a RKC out there in Newport. He works with beach volleyball players. If it makes a beach volleyball player improve their jump, then it's obviously pretty good. When people talk to me about fat loss, I'm a big fan of Josh Hillis, of course, when it comes to things like fat loss, because he's there in the trenches. He's working with people and he's transforming lives. A person I like talking to a lot is Taylor Lewis. He works with the cystic fibrosis people and elite, the most famous baseball players in the history of the game. And he uses both sides to talk to each other, so to speak, So when you hear something from him, it's always right. Got to tell you one thing. Chris White and Chris Holder, I just did that RKC with them. I watched them do a couple of things and took a lot of notes. So yeah, I got my ear to the train tracks on a lot of people. It's frustrating in the last couple of years. There's a lot of people I don't mention they got themselves stuck, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with getting stuck, except that things come up and things change, and you can't always, kind of bully your way to the next answer. So the other thing I strongly recommend people do all the time, it's a little different, but it's part of my answer, is I think it's really important to read classics and epics, books that challenge you a little bit, probably movies that challenge you a little bit too, because I have yet to read a book that's an epic that hasn't made me realize something huge. If you lose this track meet by you throwing the discus out of bounds, or you get pinned in a wrestling match, and then you pick up a book that's epic and you read about, that was just today. Are you going to get back up? That's why I always recommend my athletes do their best to really expand their great books reading. Yeah, I think. With like Danny Cavaldo's book Strength Rules, he's got that 3-point thing that I just thought was hilariously insightful. Like, yeah, man, yeah, it is that simple. But it was also important that week that I reread, at the same time I was reading that, I reread Skippy Dies, this great book from Ireland that is not simple. It's very complex. It expects a lot from the reader. So I think you need both.